Welcome, dear friends, to Tales of Gen X Terror, where we unpack the apocalyptic dread underneath the skin of late Cold War pop culture. My name's Neil, and I was born on the other side of a town ripped in two. By that I mean East Los Angeles, not East Berlin. In case you haven't picked it up, I've been a comic book fan and reader since as long as I can remember. I begged my parents to take me to 7-Eleven or the local drugstore to pull off these awesome 4-color treasures from spinner racks. If you don't know what a spinner rack is, that's a whole other thing. Once I discovered the local comic book convention and comic stores in the early 80s, this was about a couple decades after Stan Lee made radioactivity the way to get superpowers. Then came Alan Moore. I count Alan Moore as my favorite author, by the way. This guy is a writer's writer. He wanted to approach comics like they were actual literature, and at this point he's still just a young dude. He's just getting known in the United States for writing the horror book Swamp Thing. In the UK he's doing Marvel Man and V for Vendetta for Warrior magazine. That stuff will show up in the States a little bit later, but it's also drenched in anti-nuke sentiment. Then he gets together with Dave Gibbons to create Watchmen. Maybe I'm acting like Watchmen isn't something that hasn't already permeated the public consciousness. I mean, there's been a movie, which I'm not talking about. There's the HBO series, which is also not going to get addressed in this video. Even the famous case between DC Comics, the contract dispute between DC Comics and Alan Moore, that's none of my business. All I want to do is look at the effect of the Cold War on this groundbreaking piece of work. In case the context of the story isn't clear, Watchmen is a superhero deconstruction that supposes that costumed characters are just as flawed and potentially awful as you or me. Let's take a look at a couple of details in the background. If you want the basic plot, this old-timey superhero named the Comedian was killed, and it starts with the investigation by the street-level superhero named Rorschach, who is kinda not together. I'm gonna skip over most of the plot though and look at a couple of street level details. These are details that may have gotten missed if all you've seen is the movie. For instance, there's this one panel which features Rorschach walking down the street, but in the background is a strip club called Enola Gay and the Little Boys. In case you don't know Enola Gay and the Little Boys, well, Enola Gay is the airplane that took our nuclear warheads, Fat Man and Little Boy, over to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this is just in the background of 1980s New York. This is just normal in this world of the Watchmen. Another detail you might have missed is the presence of Hiroshima shadows, which are bits of graffiti painted by the local hooligans that are remnants of the shadows left after the nuclear bombs landed on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. That is some heartbreaking stuff. Stuff that I wasn't seeing as a tween in my superhero comics. We just didn't talk about it. So I want to cut to one longer scene from the first issue. This is one of the central characters of the book. It's one of the central themes of the book, if you haven't already noticed. It is the first appearance of John Osterman. Now, just to get the flavor of this, we see in this first issue Rorschach just picking up clues. He's kind of like if Batman was just a dude in the street, and he shakes down criminals, he talks to the other superheroes that he has met over the decades, and then we come up on this scene. Of course, he's kind of like Punisher with his cool war journal, and by cool I mean not too sane. At this point, he's talked to superheroes, other costumed heroes from around his past, because the Comedian is dead, and so he thinks that there's a whole conspiracy going on. Only two names remaining on my list. Both share private headquarters at Rockefeller Military Research Center. I shall go to them. I shall go and tell the indestructible man that someone plans to murder him. I gotta point out the lettering too, because this font that Rorschach writes in is not normal comics lettering. It really nerdy detail, and I point out that when we go from all the other scenes, we're in this 9-panel grid, which we break away from very shortly. Everyone is basically human-sized until we get to this scene. Good evening, Rorschach. Good evening, Dr. Manhattan. And I think the impact of this, he's taking up 2/3 of the page. Dr. Manhattan is giant in this. He is enormous. And in case you didn't know, Dr. Manhattan is named after the Manhattan Project, which was the big project that the Americans developed the nuclear bomb in. I could say a lot more about this, but I think we planted some seeds. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons were taking all of the fears that we were feeling in the 80s and putting voice to them, making something scary feel real so that we could process it. I know there's a bunch that I'm leaving out, but this is just to give us a little bit of the flavor of what this book is about. And everything in this book is flavored in Cold War. But if there's something that you feel like needs to be brought up, or if you think that there are other books, songs, games, toys, other stuff that I need to be checking out in this series, go ahead and leave that stuff in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Use your fingers to do that with the bell. And I will see you when the other shoe drops.